I this is not about a movie, and as you may have seen, this is much more about Robert Downey Jr.'s return to the MCU. Now, this has been covered everywhere, so I won't be saying anything new, but I would like to share what I think my experience is, or based on my experience as a filmmaker, like what this means for Marvel, what I think it means for their priorities, and what it means for audiences. I'll start with the least important, right? The least important, I think, is to its audiences. And what I mean by that is from my point of view, the least important of all of these is what happens to the audience, because I don't think it matters. The only thing that matters to Disney, of course, is the bottom line, right? Like how much money is this bringing in. They've had a lot of successes this summer, for bringing in movie after movie over $1 billion, or at least being number one. Maybe not over $1 billion, but at least they've had some really good successes in a an otherwise lazy summer season. And of course, you all know summer is supposed to be like the time for movies. Summer and like the end of the year, Oscar award season. Like these are the two times 6 months apart that are really meant to bring in a boatload of movies and therefore a boatload of people to the audience. And Disney is the MCU very specifically. Disney as a whole actually, but Disney specifically, or the MCU specifically, has had a huge problem in bringing people back to the audience. And what phase are we in? Phase five. It's been a bit of a downfall. So I don't, as from an audience point of view, I think this is all. It doesn't matter, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't matter. It's they're making a bet on who's going to spend money to their movie. The really important part of this, the part that has me kind of reeling, is what it means for their priorities. If you don't know, Disney made a statement, I think it was last year at Bob Iger's return, that they weren't going to focus on like individualized movies anymore. They weren't going to focus, in terms of the animation studio, they weren't going to focus on individualized stories. They were really focusing on sequels. If we want to say something else, they were focusing on their own IP. And how they can make derivatives of those of that IP into motion pictures, into TV shows, into what have you, any kind of media for people to consume. And I think that strategy, though it hasn't been said, is exactly what's being filtered into the MCU. The MCU has most certainly taken criticism for its very weird and wild turns in terms of, I think, what Phase 4 with the TV shows and the movies and the multiverse and everything being connected or not connected or what have you. And I think it's a bad look. Not only do I think it's a bad look, but I think a lot of people were wondering what happened to the ship that we had been on for so long. The ship that felt so right to be able to enjoy 10, 20 movies and have such a satisfying conclusion. That's what people were hammering home. And I think it's easy for a giant in this space to take some missteps. So I'm not really concerned with that. I think it's always going to happen, bell curves and all. But with Robert Downey Jr. returning, I'm concerned about what it means for the originality, for the hype to return. So, in terms of Robert Downey Jr. returning, I think what's really interesting is less about what they do with Kang or Doctor Doom. Actually, we'll talk about Kang. I think it's less about what they do with Doctor Doom or Kang or whoever. I do not care about comic books that much uh, to want to make sure that the text matches the movies. I'm here for a really great cinematic experience, and I think Marvel, at least in the first few phases, delivered on that exponentially. The problem that I have is what I think they're actually saying, what they're saying to the art. And I remember when Apple got into this big thing because they had this commercial where they had this pressurized machine kind of squishing down on the different instruments, and there's this big uproar about Apple essentially saying that machines could just take over art and do this work and blah blah blah. And I think what we're missing is that even the arbiters of our art, the distributors of our art, is also making that statement, or making a similar detrimental statement. that is that one, we're being trained on just liking one type of thing, which I think is a problem. But two, I think what are how do I phrase this? I think there's a morality issue. And Disney being Disney, there's always been a morality issue. I mean, look at Miley Cyrus, and like she just did this whole thing talking about how, she apologizes to Disney, which I question if there's a Hannah Montana conversations happening again. I just do. And and I wonder, there was this whole gay marriage thing at the parks. I wonder what's being said specifically about Jonathan Majors not returning. That wasn't part of the conversation about Robert Downey Jr. returning. And just to widen it out, Disney owns a lot of studios, a lot of properties. They are a very big company besides Marvel, besides Star Wars. Like, they own ABC and Hulu and FX. Like, they have a lot of different umbrellas. And I argue that there isn't one person, there are a few people who are quite problematic in their personal lives. And I am not, let me preface this by saying that I believe victims of domestic abuse. I have no opinion on, I'll try really hard not to have an opinion on about what happened with Jonathan Majors' case. He was found guilty. That's something that he's got to live with. However, genuine question, is it a double standard that Robert Downey Jr. gets a second chance, third chance, fourth chance, and Jonathan Majors is recast, or not recast, but essentially his spot in the MCU is taken over by Robert Downey Jr. Right? The irony in this is that he is replaced with someone with a problematic history themselves. I am curious about what that means. Again, Disney has always had this whole morality thing. If you make too much of a big stink in public, you are not welcome back to Disney. And that's just been made very, very clear. But I'm worried. I'm worried about what it means for filmmakers. And I hope, with the way of the world and the way that Hollywood is going, and that it just means that we're able to get creative again and create some original properties that hopefully people see and are able to exhibit some great talent both behind and in front of the camera. So we don't have to keep seeing the same people over and over again, and give new people a shot and forgive people and not that we have to forgive Jonathan Majors specifically, but forgive people for their mistakes and allow them to continue to do their art and allow people to, go to jail, do their sentence, whatever it is, and allow them to get back into the world. Redemption stories, we love to see them on screen, but we hate when it's a bit too real. Anyways, this is a very long rant. This is too long of a rant. I'm truly concerned about what it means to the MCU, and I hate to think that Martin Scorsese and the other critics of Marvel are right, or at least are going to be right, in that this is just a play, and that this is just, the consideration for the art of comic book movies will disintegrate like a Thanos snap. Anyways, I came back with a rant, and I'm sorry, but we are back. I got some really good episodes coming up with Kate Driver, who's a brilliant filmmaker. I've got some nice longer pieces that I want to explore here, so please subscribe where you can, and let's get the show back going. Until next time, peace.